The moment the cold champagne splashed across my face and soaked into my simple black dress, the entire room froze like a movie put on pause. The soft music faded beneath an instant hush, silverware clattered, and 50 stunned guests stared in wide-eyed horror at the scene unfolding in Rebecca's perfectly polished dining room, a room she always bragged was fit for royalty. Her voice pierced the silence like a siren. "How dare you speak to that man in my house?" She jabbed a stiff, manicured finger toward James Bennett, who stood beside the appetizer table looking like he'd stepped into the wrong universe. He didn't defend himself. He just shifted uncomfortably under the weight of every curious glance. My brother Thomas rushed to my side, shoving a napkin into my hand. "Beck, you've gone too far." "Too far?" Rebecca barked out a shrill laugh that didn't match the expensive pearls around her neck. "That man destroyed my career at Morton and Price, and now my own sister-in-law is chatting with him like they're old friends." I dabbed at my dripping face, trying to stay calm, even as the champagne she once called too classy for someone with such plain taste dripped down my chin. "I was discussing business with James earlier this evening," I said softly. Rebecca's face twisted with disgust. "Business? What could a middle school math teacher possibly know about business, real business, about running a fashion empire?" If only she knew about the late-night meetings I'd been attending for months, the confidential papers I'd signed yesterday, the massive shift that was coming straight for her precious elite fashion group. But she carried on, oblivious. James stepped forward, voice steady. "Rebecca, I never fired you from Morton and Price. You were asked to resign after accusing me of leaking designs to competitors." She spun toward him like a storm breaking loose. "But look at me now, vice president of marketing at Elite Fashion Group. I'm worth 10 times what I ever was at your pathetic little company." James caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. He knew what was coming next. I began. "Speaking of Elite Fashion Group, don't pretend you understand my world, Sarah," she snapped. "Go back to your tiny classroom with your tiny salary and your off-the-rack clothes. Some of us were meant for bigger things." Thomas tried to calm her again. "Rebecca, that's enough." "No," I said quietly, sliding my phone from my purse. "Let her finish. I'm actually very interested in Elite Fashion Group's success, especially their recent quarterly reports." Rebecca's confident smile faltered. "What would you know about our reports?" "More than you think." I scrolled through my emails as murmurs rippled through the room. "For example," I continued, "I know about the manufacturing delays in Milan, the failed launch in Asia, the investors who are pulling out." The color drained from her face. "Those are confidential. And," I added, "the internal investigation into leaked designs." I glanced at James. History always did have a strange way of repeating itself. "How dare you?" Rebecca hissed, grabbing another champagne glass. But Thomas caught her wrist before she could throw it. "Because," I said, pulling up one final email, "as of yesterday at p.m., I am the controlling interest in Elite Fashion Group." The champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered across the marble floor she bragged about weekly. "That's impossible," she whispered. "The buyout was handled by Aurora Investments, my investment firm." I finished for her. "The same one that acquired Morton and Price last year. And James has been an excellent advisor in fashion industry acquisitions." The room fell so silent I could hear the delicate classical music drifting in from the speakers, a playlist Rebecca carefully crafted to impress people who no longer appeared impressed. "You're lying," she breathed. I forwarded the email to her phone. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped it as she read the official announcement, the one scheduled to go public Monday morning. 15 years, I said quietly, my voice steady at last. 15 years of you mocking my career, my clothes, my lifestyle, all while embezzling from every company stupid enough to hire you. I never save it for the board meeting." "Oh, did I forget to mention? James is returning as CEO. We have interesting files to discuss." Thomas stared at me in shock, realization finally sinking in. "Sarah, those evening classes you were taking, business administration and corporate law," I confirmed, Turns out teaching math is great practice for analyzing financial chaos. Around us, Rebecca's glamorous guests whispered, phones lighting up as news spread like wildfire. Her perfect social image was caving in front of everyone. "You can't do this to me," she hissed. "I'm family." I laughed. Family? Was it family when you told people at my father's funeral that I disappointed him? When you spread rumors I couldn't afford a real career? When you blocked my students from your fancy mentorship program because they weren't rich enough? James stepped forward. "The board meeting is at AM sharp, Rebecca. Bring your resignation letter." And Rebecca, I added, picking up the modest handbag she mocked earlier, "that champagne you threw at me? I own the vineyard now too." As I turned to leave, Thomas caught my arm. "Why didn't you tell me you were building an investment empire while teaching algebra?" I smiled. Some lessons are better learned through demonstration. The last thing I saw before stepping out the door was Rebecca sinking into her expensive dining chair, mascara streaking down her face, staring at the email that shattered everything she thought she controlled. Monday was going to be interesting. Indeed, that morning, the media crowded outside Elite Fashion Group's headquarters, buzzing like bees. Clips of Rebecca's meltdown had already exploded online, teacher boss trending right beside the video of her throwing champagne. I walked into the boardroom at 8:55 a.m. sharp, wearing a custom suit from James's new independent label. Rebecca sat stiffly in her usual seat, clutching a Hermes bag she definitely bought with company money. "Before we begin," she announced shakily, "I want to clarify that Saturday's event was a personal matter." "Actually," I said, sitting at the head of the table, "your public assault on the company's new owner is very much a business matter." Her carefully selected allies shifted uneasily. James entered carrying a thick folder. "Let's start with the Milan disaster," he said, handing out reports, specifically how designs were leaked to competitors weeks before launch. Rebecca's perfectly styled hair couldn't hide her nervous fidgeting. "That was never proven." Page 3. I directed the board. "Bank transfers from rival fashion house to an offshore account. The same pattern we found at Morton and Price 3 years ago." "You've been investigating me," Rebecca's voice cracked. "For 18 months, James confirmed. Ever since Sarah approached me about acquiring a lit fashion group, I pulled up that presentation screen. While you were mocking my little teacher salary, I was building a case. Every leaked design, every embezzle fund, every false expense report. Those bags were for work," she protested. "The 10 Birkins charged a marketing reserve." I clicked through photos. Orth business trips to Paris that just happened to coincide with Fashion Week. Thomas, whom I invited as a witness, watched his wife crumble. "Beck, what did he do?" "What I had to," she snapped. "To maintain appearances, to be taken seriously in this industry, to feed your ego," I corrected, while rejecting talented designers because they didn't come from wealthy families. The board members reviewed the evidence, their faces growing darker. Rebecca's Bigsit supporter, a man who frequently flirted with her at company events, wouldn't meet her eyes. "You have two options," he stated clearly. "Resign quietly and return the embezzled funds, or face a public prosecution." "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. "Think of what this will do to Thomas." "Like you thought of him when you were stealing from the company," I raised an eyebrow. "Or when you were meeting that junior designer in Paris." Thomas' head snapped up. Rebecca went paleo. "That's right," I continued. "We have those receipts too. The solo business trips weren't so solo-worthy. I can explain." She turned to Thomas, but he was already walking out of the boardroom. "Your resignation letter." James placed it in front of her. "Or should we continue with the Paris photos?" Her hand trembled as she reached for the pen. "Everything I built." "You built nothing," I corrected. "You stole, cheated, and climbed over others. Now, we're going to show you what real leadership looks like. By ruining me, by transforming this company." I stood up. "The mentorship program you rejected, we're implementing it across all departments. Those scholarship cases you mixed, they're getting internships. Real fashion should be accessible to everyone with talent, not just those with trust funds." Rebecca's signature was shaky but final. As security waited to escort her out, She turned to me one last time. "I never understood," she said quietly. "How did a math teacher outsmart me?" "Because I actually did the math," I replied. "And unlike you, I learned that true value isn't in a price tag." As she was let out, her designer heels clicking for the last time on A-late fashion group's marble floors, James turned to me with a slight smile, ready to announce the new direction. I looked at the board members, still processing the morning's revelations. Time to teach them all a valuable lesson about real fashion mathematics. 6 months later, I stood on a late fashion group's newly renovated design floor, watching students from my former math class present their collection ideas. The space once reserved for only the most prestigious designers now buzzed with diverse talent from all backgrounds. Miss Park, one of my former students, called out, "We applied the golden radio who taught us to the dress patterns," Ismold. Remembering how Rebecca had once sneered at my suggestion to use a mathematical principles in fashion design. Now, our Math Meets Fashion program was revolutionizing the industry. The elevator danged and Thomas stepped out. Since Rebecca's departure, he'd been slowly healing, even joining her company's legal team to help protect young designers' rights. "The Paris collection numbers are in," he said, handing me a tablet. "Turns out authenticity sells better than exclusivity." Our first show under new management had featured designs from scholarship students alongside destable names. The fashion world had initially scoffed until the sales figures proved them wrong. "Have you heard from her?" I asked quietly. "Rebecca?" He shook his head. "Last I heard, she was trying to launch her own line, but without company funds to steal from." "Sir?" A young intern rushed up to us. "James Bennett is here with the community college representatives." The meeting room was filled with educators from local schools, the same institutions Rebecca had refused to work with. James stood at the front, explaining our new apprenticeship program. "Every student with talent deserves a chance," he was saying, "regardless of their zip code or bank account." I joined them, knowing how different this room felt from the elitist space it had been 6 months ago. The pretentious art had been replaced with student designs. The exclusive guest list had given way to open doors. Sarah James nodded to me, "Want to tell them about the mathematics of sustainable fashion." As I took the podium, I caught a glimpse of movement in the hallway. Rebecca stood outside the glass walls watching. She looked different. Simpler clothes? No. Designer bag. She'd been banned from the building, but security must have let her up for this moment. Our eyes met. In hers, I saw something I'd never seen before. Understanding, maybe even a hint of respect. I turned back to the eager faces in the room. "Fashion isn't just about aesthetics," I began. "It's about equations, balance, the perfect ratio of creativity to practicality. And most importantly, it's about multiplying opportunity, not dividing people." Rebecca remained for a few minutes, watching silently as I explained how we were transforming her former fashion empire into an inclusive powerhouse. Then she turned and walked away, her steps lacking their former arrogance. "That was closure for her," Thomas said softly. "For all of us," I agreed. "Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone's world. It's building a better one in its place." Later that evening, as I packed up my office, still modest despite my position, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a note from Rebecca. "You were right about everything. The real fashion mathematics, addition through sharing, not subtraction through exclusion." I pinned it to my board next to the company's new motto. "Style has no price tag." The lights of the city twinkled outside my window as I gathered my things. Somewhere out there, Rebecca was learning to live without her facade of luxury. And here in the company she owned, a new generation of designers was learning that true elegance comes from authenticity, not price tags. "Ready for tomorrow's students' showcase?" Thomas asked from the doorway. "Always," I smiled. After all, the best lessons often come from unexpected teachers. As we left the building, I passed the wall of new designer photos, faces of every color, background, and neighborhood. Each one proved that my greatest calculation had been correct. Talent x opportunity equals success. The fashion world had learned its lesson, and somewhere in Paris, there was an empty seat at Fashion Week where Rebecca's to sit, now filled by a scholarship student with dreams bigger than any designer label.